Afternoon, Dr. Bhabani Mallia here. Today we are going to discuss about factor analysis and cluster analysis. Prior to that, I would like to say that beginning from the correlation, all the chapters what we are covering here, all are related to correlation. From correlation, we came to regression. First, we find out what is the relationship, or we can say association between the variables. Then we became able to find out what will be the future value of one value when the another value variable value has given. That is called regression. Then, in the context of regression, we came to know that we always cannot deal with only one independent and one dependent variable, but it is required to deal with set of independent variable and what is the impact of that set of independent variable on the dependent variable, that is in multivariate analysis, or we can say it is in multiple regression analysis. The same way we covered the logistic regression analysis. But now today's chapter is directly related to our correlation, as factors are not actually given in the questionnaire or in the data set, and we have to develop the factors from the data set, and how we will find out factors that is related to correlation. So once we understand correlation, then it will be easy in our part to find out or define the questions those who will come under one factor. So today's chapter contains introduction of the factor analysis, how it is and how it is working. Then the definition of analysis, factor analysis. Then a numerical example we have cited here to more accurately understanding of factor analysis. Then the same we have shown the SPSS screen, how we will calculate the factor analysis questions by using the SPSS softwares, and some limitations and application we have cited here. And then we move to cluster analysis, which is another analysis tools in research. And then we have discussed about what are the inputs of cluster analysis, then different approaches of cluster analysis. After covering that, we dive to factors to be considered while cluster analysis technique that we have discussed. In the same process, we have also given some screenshots of SPSS, how it looks like in the cluster analysis and the steps to calculate the cluster analysis. After that, we have given the application of the cluster analysis. Then the overall summary has discussed in the last of the chapter. So these are the learning outcomes of today's chapter. That is, after end of this unit, we will be able to appreciate the application area, particularly for factor analysis and cluster analysis in the context of marketing research. And we will be able to explain how factor analysis and cluster analysis are computed, and which method and when to be computed. Then after completion of this calculation part, we will be able to interpret the findings of factor analysis and cluster analysis both. Then we have differentiated between logistic regression and discriminant relation, and and also demonstrated the use of SPSS in factor analysis and cluster analysis. Then we have cited a real world marketing decision, how decision taking in marketing research is purely rely on the factor analysis and cluster analysis that we have cited. So before going to the discussion, we must know that, as we know, the decision making is too difficult if we have no data. So nowadays in marketing research, we require the data driven decision, which will which will be more accurate and exact solution, we can say we can find by data driven decisions. But the now question is how the data will be get. We understood from the past unit that data will be collected, and it will be collected, if it is first time, then it is primary data. So here we are talking about the primary data. So before going to primary data, we need to have set few relevant questions on our research problem. So suppose we framed questions, the relevant questions we framed all possible question again we can say we framed and we have collected data from the respondents. So after collection of data, we saw there are many variables, n variables are there. So when the number of variables is too much or too high, then in that case, observing and understanding, or we can say analyzing each variables is too difficult. And sometimes we find that few variables questions, or we can say some questions are very similar to another questions. So such kind of problem we have faced after collection of data, or we can say after cleaning of data. When the data set in front of us, we found such type of difficulties. So what we will do in the factor analysis, we can say it is, or we can say it is a techniques or tools that reduce the data. Then the term reduction of data is now very confusing for the researcher, those who are in the research or any decision making situation. How could you reduce the data? As because the data is so important for the marketing research or any kind of research a person is conducting, then how we can reduce? So as because we have framed the importance by seeing the importance of the questions from research questions, now we are saying that we will reduce the data. So I'm clearing the concept of reduction of data, that we are reducing but not eliminating them, but we are reducing the data means we are giving some data under a factor, or we can say we are reducing the data in the sense that we are combining combining the similar kind of questions and then and assigning them as one factor. So it is called factor analysis, and the name it shows that we are analyzing the factors. So let us come to the introduction of the factor analysis. Here, so the first point is it addresses the data overload. The factor analysis actually solves the problem having too many individual data items and to analyze, as we discussed, to reduce them in a smaller or more manageable set underlying variables. It means we are reducing the data, no doubt, but we are assigning one factor for all, or we can say we are grouping the variables into into a factor. So it means we are covering all the data, we are studying all the data, but under not under a variable but under a factor. A factor contains few similar type of variables under it. The second one is identifies hidden pattern. It means that the technique works by grouping together variables that are highly correlated. As from the beginning I told that factor analysis is directly related to correlation. Now the situation came how the correlation is here in the factor analysis. Then I would like to say that when we are grouping or we are assembling a few variables under a factor, how we will conduct that? Now we are finding what is the correlation between these questions. If correlations are very high in between the questions, then we are putting together this question under a factor. This is called factor, and here the correlation theory is work. So correlation told that all are measuring a common underlying theme of factor. Then we are designing this as a factor, and under that factor these sort of questions will be understudied. Then the third point of the factor analysis is provides a weighting scheme. So, what is it? Now, it doesn't just factor analysis. It doesn't mean that it is grouping the item. It also calculates how strongly each original variables contribute or to load on the newly identified factor, providing a quantitative measures of their relationship. Now, the new term came is loads. What is the meaning of load? As because we are newly using this term load, the load means as it defined how strongly it is correlated and how what is the correlation value of these questions in between. So it is we are calculating the factor load that will indicate us this factor or this variable will come under this factor we have designed. So it is called factor loading. It indicates, or we can say, it identifies the factor providing the quantitative measures on the relationship, means it's a correlation. Then the fourth one is it reveals the core constructs. The primary goal is to uncover the fundamentals of an unobservable constructs. So here I would like to cite one term is latent variables. So what is that? Now, no doubt we have collected data and we have assigned few variables for the data set, but there are something which is not directly observed actually. So these kind of data or these kind of variables, those are not directly unobservable. This is called latent variables. So the primary goal is that to uncover the fundamentals by unobservable constructs like company image, customer satisfaction, or brand perceptions. So these are the constructs. They are driving the responses in the data. And the last but not the least, it aids strategic decision making. So by simplifying complex data into meaningful factors, it provides clear and actionable insights, making the information directly useful for decision making. So here this point can be elaborated in that way that when we have a huge large data set, it is not looking very good, and it is also not giving so high insights for a researcher. In that case, we observe and we find out the correlation among these questions, and finding the highly correlated question, we have assigned one factor. So when we sorted them, or we have assigned them under some factors, now it looks very precise and very meaningful. So in that way, if we have converted a large data set into a small factors without losing any kind of data, now it will be more beneficial and more important, meaningful for a researcher to take any kind of strategic decision from the factors. So the analyst is interested in the factor analysis to examining the strength of the overall association among the variables, in the sense that we would like to count for this association in terms of smaller set of linear composites of original variables that preserves most of the information in the data set, in the full data set. Second one is no attempt is made to divide the variable into criterion and prediction sets. The third one is the models are primarily based on linear relationship under factor analysis, which never be a non-linear one. And the basic dual objectives of factor analysis is it simplifies the data by reducing large number of variables into small number of variables with minimal loss of information. As we said, here our intention is not of losing the data, but we are reducing, or we can say we are just combining a few variables and assigning as a common factor. And it also analyzes the independent interdependence of interrelationship among the total variables. The basic assumptions of factor analysis is that some underlying structure that exists in the set of selected variables. The basic fundamental is, suppose a question has given 30 questions. Suppose in a research we have 30 questions. So what we are doing, suppose I have reduced to 6 factors. So it means here we are interested to see whether any structure is there which is actually hidden. So that to be explored in the factor analysis. It is the most important assumption of the factor analysis, and the sample must be homogeneous with respect to the underlying factor structure. So what factor structure we had given, then it will be homogeneous with the questions and the structure. It is the most important. If heterogeneity is occurring, then we cannot keep them under one factor. And if the sample size is heterogeneous, as we said, with regarded to at least one subset of the variables, then the first factor will represent those variables that are more homogeneous across the entire sample. As we said, we are assuming that the most second assumption of the factor analysis is the sample must be homogeneous. Suppose we found some kind of heterogeneity is there, then what we will do? Now we will frame a subset of the homogeneous variable, and that homogeneous variables will represent those variables and that are more homogeneous across the entire sample. And the fourth assumption of the factor analysis is the variables must be sufficiently intercorrelated to produce representative factors. As we said, if some variables are correlated only, then only we will consider or we will keep them under one factor. If the correlation is very less, so we should not keep them. Sometimes we are ignoring these variables values. So the one numerical examples we have cited here for the factor analysis, we can see here the equations I have cited here, that F stands for the factor analysis. It is A1, X1, A21, X2, A3I, X3 plus so on AMI, XM. So here a term 1, 2, 3 up to they are having a suffix that I. What is that I? Now that factor I derive, these are the linear equation as it is clearly visible. All the power of the variables are 1, and which is actually one of the most important assumption of the factor analysis, that it is in a linear form. So i's are derived and each variables appear in each equations. We can see here x1, x2, x3, whatever variables we have, they must be appeared in the linear equation, and the coefficients that a1i, a2i, these are the coefficient indicates the importance of each variables with respect to a particular factor. The coefficient of 0 indicate that variable is no significance for the factor. So the variables having 0 coefficient, it shows that this is the variable and they are having some data, but it is no significant for the factor. That is why we can go for the ignorance of this fact variables. Those are having no significance importance for the factor. So in principal component analysis, the factors are derived sequentially and using criteria of the maximum reduction in variance and non-correlation among factors. Again, I am repeating the variance and non-correlation or maximum reduction. These are the important terms in the factor analysis. With the help of this, in further slide, we will discuss how we will calculate and how we will interpret this factor analysis result in our research, and on the basis of this result, how we will take the decision for the marketing research. See, there is a questions where I have cited here salesperson. So we have 14 salespersons we have here, and they are having different variables. One is height, weight, education, age, number of children, size of household, then IQ. So the manufacturer, this question actually on the manufacturer of fabrication units. So he is now interested for identifying the determinants of the successful salespersons. So the area of interest of the manufacturer is, if as he has 14 salesmen, now he want to define which one is the most successful salesperson among them. So the manufacturer has on file information of 14 salesperson that is cited in the table, and it has shown that wondering whether he could reduce this 7 variable into 2 or 3 factor. This company has 14 salesperson and they are having different 7 different kind of quality each, or different variables we can say they have taken for the 14 salesperson. But now the company is interested to study to The successful salesperson. So before going to the calculation of successful salesperson, the company want to reduce that seven variables into two to three variables. So now the question is, can we now reduce the seven variables into three variables? So answer is yes, as because as I had discussed, the aim of the factor analysis is we will analyze all the variable, but if there are some kind of variables or questions are very similar or highly correlated with among themselves, then there is no need of studying each in highly correlated variable separately, but we should combine them into a factor. So here also we will do the same thing. We will analyze the table or the questions, then we'll find out if anything or any questions will be combined and will be treated as one factor. We can see here in the table 11.2, from the seven questions, so what we have done, we have given three factors. So the variable were previously height, weight, education, age, number of children, size of household, IQ. Then the sum of square and variance summarizes the calculation, and communalities has also been calculated, that I will discuss here now. So factor one, we have as it is clearly visible, sales people characteristics. We have named it, and on that we have three factors. So these are the calculation. I will tell you what is the calculation. Now, for the first question is how we convert them into factors. Now, as per the theory of factor analysis, it says, first of all, we have to find the correlations between these variable values. If I found two to three variables having this highly correlated with each other, then what I did, I appeared them under a factor. In that manner, we have done that division of factor, converting the variables into factors, and we found these three factors, and we have also cited the correlation. Now, one more question is there, that is, what is communality and how it will be calculated. So, before coming to the communality, we should discuss what is factor loading, the most important thing, and it has also discussed in the first introduction chapter that there was a term known as loading. So the meaning of factor loading is the coefficient in the factor equation is called factor loading, and they appear above in each factor column corresponding to each variables. So what are they? Now factor loading is nothing but the correlation between these variables, how they are related, whether it is highly related or not highly related, that we have determined and we have cited here. On the basis of factor loading, we have divided the variable into three factors. Coming to the equation, as we have cited here, the equation of factor analysis, F1 is equal to some coefficient with the respective variable, and in the same way up to the end term of the variable. See, the same question we have repeated here, as we have three variables. So three factor analysis values we have calculated. So let us suppose for F1. F1 means factor 1. Factor 1, the coefficients, as we have said, the factor loading is nothing but the coefficient that we have calculated here, the correlation matrix. So here the correlation with x1, this is for x2, this coefficient into x3, it is clearly mentioned, this variable into x4, this variable into x5, then x6 and x7. So we have multiplied the coefficients of respective variable with the variables, and the solution will be the nothing but the answer of the factor analysis, the F1 for first factor. Similar the second factors we have calculated here, and the factor 3, for factor 3 we have calculated F3. But what about the communality? Communality is nothing but the sum of the squares of the factors. So we have taken the squares and we have added this. This is the communality for each variables we have calculated. Let us discuss the same thing over here. The factor analysis employs the criterion of maximum reduction of the variance and the variance found in the initial of the sets variables. We can see here the variables we have cited here. These are the correlations value we have cited, and we can say that in our example factor 1 accounts 51.6% of the total variance, and factor 2 for 26.4%, and factor 3 is 16.5% together explained. So together three factor explain almost 95%. If we add this factor 51.6 plus 26.4 plus 16.5, altogether it is 95% they have explained variances. Coming to the communality, as we discussed, the idea of solution of the factor derived will explain 100% of the variance in each of the original variables. Communality measures the percentage of the variance in the original variables that is captured by the combination of the factor in the solution. So thus a communality is the computed of each of the original variable. So it was all about the calculation of factor analysis. Then in the factor analysis also there are two majors. One is exploratory factor analysis and the confirmatory factor analysis. But we will see how this factor analysis we can use by using the SPSS software package. Let us see the home screens is there, and also few steps I have mentioned in the PPT, so that it will be easy for anyone can follow those steps for calculation of the factor analysis in the research. See, here we have taken 250 samples for car user that we have collected, and the questionnaire consists of 21 questions. So our questionnaire having 21 questions means huge number of variables will be there, and it is measured. The question is selected by using the 5-point Likert scale, that is 1 to 5. 5 will be coded as the strongly agree, and 1 will be strongly disagree. In that way, we have collected, and we have also insert in the SPSS sheet. Now, our objective is we are going to solve the same problem by using the SPSS package. So as we know, before going to SPSS package, we have to code them, as because no qualitative data can be calculated by the SPSS package. So we have coded them. Then we move to the SPSS. From SPSS toolbar, we have to select analyze. From analyze, we will have to go for dimension reduction, as because factor analysis is nothing but the reduction of the dimension. Then from the dimension reduction, we will select the factor. Then select the variable from the left hand side of the dialog box and transfer them into the box level variable. In this case, all the 21 code items were transferred. So whatever number of codes I have, whatever number of questions I have coded, that should be transferred to the dialog box. Then we will click on the descriptive buttons which brings up in the dialog box. Then in the statistic selection, make sure the initial solution is ticked in the section marked up the correlation matrix. Then select the options of KMO battery test for the sphericity. Then we will go for the continue. So after that, what will happen? Click on extraction to specific of the method. Particularly in this extracted factors to be extracted in that method. In this PCA is a method for appropriate performance of the factor analysis. So for PCA, what principal component analysis, what we will do, we will go to the extraction, then from the method we will select principal component analysis, then we will continue. After that, we will select the option, check the coefficient display format and restrict absolute value to be 0.5, or obtaining factors with loading greater than 0.5. After choosing all these things, then we will click on OK. So after clicking of OK, we will get the KMO table. So now the result is in front of us. The question is how to interpret them. Particularly KMO Batley's tests we are conducting in factor analysis to understand whether the data adequacy is present or not. There is a thumb rule that the data, if the KMO test is more than zero point 0.8 or it is 1, then the sampling or the data I have collected is adequate only. So let us discuss what result we have find out in the interpretation. We can say KMO whether the data available can be used for factor analysis. Whatever data I have collected, whether they are the eligible data set with whom or by using which we can calculate factor analysis. Yes. So as for our table, the value is 0.893. The interpretation I have made here, the KMO value in this case, in our case, it is 0.893. As a rule of thumb of KMO value, it is 0.8 and 1. If it is, then it means that sampling is adequate. So, our sampling is adequate to run a factor analysis. So, after that, a significant result of Batley test appears. Significance result means the significance result will be less than 0.05. For this case, but we will do now, it indicates that the variables do relate to one another enough to run a meaningful exploratory factor analysis. So above KMO Watley test significance and the number of factors to be extracted are determined by the following steps. So here, sometimes we use the street plot for extraction of the factor or determination of the number of factors to be extracted from the for the factor analysis. One of the best method is eigenvalue and second one is street plot. But it is not always possible by observing a diagram we can identify. So in that case, we prefer eigenvalue formula or the method of extracting the variables. So for screen plot, select the number of factors with the help of the screen plot. You can see here the screen plot has given that it suggests that the factor solution contributes a larger part of the data since at the component number 5, the curve first being sorry, excuse me. The curve first begins with straighten and after that the eigenvalue going to below 1. This is about the street plot, how it is declining. So the eigenvalues variance and cumulative variance table needs to be checked from the table total variance table to be considered. So in step 3 what we will do to avoid the variables double clubbed in one factor, factor rotation is employed. So after interpretation of the output file and finalizing the number of factor to be extracted, go back to the SPSS, then we will go to analyze. From analyze button we will go for the dimension reduction. From dimension reduction we will move to factor. So clicking on the rotation in the lower part of the main dialog box, the select the type of rotation under the method. So there are 5 factors rotation method provided by the SPSS as mentioned in the above session. And however, Varimax is the most common method used for the factor rotation. So for Varimax, how we will calculate that steps I had written here. Then in factor rotation, we will choose the method. From the method, we will go to the Varimax. Then we will continue. After that, we will go for the OK button. Then we will find the table of the result. Then in step 4, what we have written the interpretation, the rotated factor matrix. So check the rotated component matrix and communalities that we have calculated by the in the step 3. So select the rotated component matrix and communalities table shown in the left side of the output file. So based on the factor loading, the factors are extracted as per the rotated component matrix. If there is no problem of cross loadings and if the factor loadings are significant, then the factor and factor loading extracted are finalized. Then along with the factor loadings, the communalities of each variables are also checked to understand how much of the extracted factors are explaining the variables in terms of percentage. Once the factor extracted are significant, they are named and defined based on the traits of the variables fallen in each factor. If the obtained factor loading are insignificant and if the extracted factors are unable to be interpreted, step 2 is repeated. And in the step 5 we will reconfirmation of the factors. In this session we are going to take a decision making step, we can say. So we require, before proceeding the final validity analysis, if there are any variables deleted in the factor extraction process or a need to change the number of factors or the type of rotation due to poor distribution of the factor loadings, then we will move to the step 4 for the again new extraction of the factors. So in the step 6, we will go for the reliability analysis. So these are the steps I had mentioned. The reliability of the inter-item correlation is measured by Cronbach's alpha using the following steps. For Cronbach's alpha reliability, we will go to again to this analysis column. Then we will move to scale. From scale, we will check the reliability analysis. Then we will compute for all the variables the reliability factor. Then we will go to press the continue. After continue, clicking on continue button, then we will find the Cronbach's alpha value. And Cronbach's alpha has a generally accepted value is 0.70, though it may drop to 0.60 in the exploratory research sometimes. The summated scales of the variables under each factors are further performed by develop the model. In step 7, reporting and interpreting of the result. So based on the factor loadings, 4 factors were extracted as per the rotated component matrix in our problem. So this identifies factors are level under responsiveness and dependability and tangibility. So these 4 factors combining assurance of the empathy of the dimension, these factors I have discussed here. The responsiveness, it means that items that fall under factor 1 are the customers feel that automobile service center will inform them exactly when the services were going to be executed, and the service rendered was fast and efficient, additional service and their cost, and the center response to request promptly, hence labeled as responsiveness. Dimension of the service quality. So how responsive is the customer, or you can say the service center it is. It is the factor 1 in our problem. Then in factor 2, it is the reliability. It says the customers feel that the automobile service centers work is done as per the promised time, vehicles are diagnosed effectively, original parts were replaced for repair during services. So it is a case of reliability. How much we will rely on the servicing center is our factor 2. Then factor 3 is called the tangibility. It means the customers feel that the service centers use the latest tools and equipments. The facilities are visually attractive and the employee are well addressed. This is the impression we can say, and this factor was named the tangibility dimension of the service quality. In factor 4, we have taken the assurance and empathy dimensions. It means the consumer believe the employees are trustworthy as because they are fulfilling all the 3 factors, they feel safe during transactions. The employees are humble and polite. The employees are able to perform their job effectively. They receive individual attention. They express empathy. They express sympathy and the reassurance of the for the problem. So these are the four factors which is most important over here in our research problem. And in this, coming to the application of the factor analysis, the first application is exploration of the data pattern. The most important objective or application, we can say, when we have a large set of data, it is too difficult to analyze them, and it also not looks good to analyze them. So in that case, we are reducing the data. By reducing the pattern is, we are identifying the correlations. In that time, we are bringing some hidden pattern or latent dimensions. Means, latent dimension says that few variables are there which cannot be directly studied, but it will be studied indirectly, or it is not. It is not directly observed, but it is observed by other variables. It is so these are the things which is explored in the factor analysis. In that case, for exploration of pattern, we should go for the factor analysis. Then the data reduction. In data reduction, basically factor analysis is extremely useful in that case. As we know, for in reduction, we are clubbing the items. Those are very similar to each other. So after that, it gives us as a result that factor analysis can be combined with other multivariate analysis techniques such as cluster analysis and conjoint analysis. So the structural equation modeling and so on, the factor development has been made for the latent variable model. So here it helps us to observe and evaluate the latent variables by reducing the data. Then it confirms the hypothesis of the factor structure. So factor analysis can be used to test whether the set of item designed for measure certain variables in fact reveals the hypothesis factor structure or not. Then theory of testing. So factor analysis can be used to test on a priority hypothesis about the relationship among a set of observable variables. For this, generally confirmatory factor analysis is used. Apart from this application, this factor analysis having some limitations also. When the data changes into some factors or changes in the sample, the data collection process or various types of measurement errors, the results of the factor analysis may also change. So the results of factor analysis are therefore less perfectly dependent, we can say dependable, as because it is affected by the changes in the data set. And during the data analysis also, sometimes more relevant factors may be left out due to cross factor loading. If in our case, if we find some cross factor loading, then poor factor loading on those factors will happen. For that, factor analysis we cannot conclude a accurate result. It is also observed that variables are completely unrelated and the factor analysis is unable to produce meaningful pattern. If it is clear from the definition that if the data that we are clubbing, they are not related at all or very less related, then we should not go for finding out any kind of pattern from the data set. It was all about the factor analysis. Then the second analysis was in our chapter was cluster analysis. The purpose of the cluster analysis is to grouping the market dimension, or we can say the grouping the consumers under study. Basically the objective of the cluster analysis is we will group them, or we will identify some clusters. Those are very homogeneous with each other in regarding as their characteristics. And for a company, it is identified cluster in a very large intention that we can serve the company as profitably or making a financially viable target maker market. It is the main business viability of the cluster analysis. And in point of customer considerations, the technique also implicitly considers the customers acknowledging that their willingness to pay is limited and is influenced by factors like product positioning and cost. And the ultimate goal and objective of this cluster analysis is to identify and serve a profitable customer segment effectively. So different approaches of cluster analysis are the most and extreme approach. You can say the cluster respondents in terms of all available information about the respondent. Although this is very high to very thorough, that it may lead to difficulty in interpretation and marked differences between the groups. That is, the clusters of groups respondents that are produced may be a hodgepodge rather than clearly marked description of the target population. And another extreme approach involves in the grouping of respondents only based on the data that directly represents the specific consumer need. As an example, consider the product's quality and price. This has the advantage of clarity of accuracy but may be quite limited in describing the target population. Factors to be considered while using the cluster analysis technique. The first one is the number of clusters may emerge after analysis. However, there is a limit of limit to the number of clusters that a company can consider due to limitation of market potential within a cluster, and the distinction between cluster is not clearly defined. Second one is cluster analysis provides a way of segmenting the market, but these segments are not watertight compartments. We can say in that case, cluster analysis will not help us. Products that are developed for a particular segment may attract people from other segments too. And the third one is the characteristics of cluster may change over time as the consumer's economic status, education, lifestyle, etc. change. And then the company has to take another look at the market segments. Why this is happening? As because the cluster sampling stage, the grouping of the customers with different segments. So as we know, everything is changeable when the taste, income, and age changes. These things are also dimensions are likely to be changed. And the clusters that have been identified are used to develop further marketing strategies in area like product development, advertising, research, distribution strategy, pricing strategies. They will also be developed. And the most important assumption in cluster analysis is that the basic measure of similarity with the understanding on which clustering is based on the valid measure of the similarity between the object. And second major assumption in the clustering objecting is theoretically justified and supported. As with other multivariate techniques, there should be theory and logic underlying the cluster analysis. And the major limitation of the cluster analysis is the difficulty in evaluating the quality of the clusters. It is very difficult to know exactly which clusters are very similar and which objects are very dissimilar. And it is also difficult to select the clustering criteria even. So among them, the different clustering methods usually given different results, differences in the criteria for emerging clusters. Therefore, it becomes a challenging task for the marketing data analyst to choose the best method of meet objectives. And the analysis is unstable when the cases are dropped because clusterers formed many by measuring the inter-object similarity of one cluster to another. Application of the coming to the applications of cluster analysis, market segmenting is most important use of the cluster analysis. So cluster analysis helps them identifying similar segment. For example, consumers may be clustered based on the benefits sought from the purchase of a product or any other common characteristics. On any other characteristics, we can go for the Cluster analysis based on the sales of consumer data, a multi-brand retailer in the fashion and lifestyle product category wants to segregate its consumers into three income groups. So high income, medium income and low income customers. So such segregation will help the retailers to develop better marketing strategies as well. So in such cases, cluster sampling is the only analysis tools to help the marketers to analyze it. Coming to the second one, understanding the behavior, buyer's behavior. So cluster analysis helps us to identify homogeneous groups of buyers and aids marketing managers in better understanding of buyers' behavior. So this is important while framing marketing mix strategy to capture the target market more efficiently, and identifying new products opportunities is also possible in cluster analysis. Clustering brands and products can help to categorize the competitive sets within the market, and selecting and it would be easier to compare the cities if they were organized to homogeneous clusters, and the findings of one taste market or city can be applied to another belonging to the same cluster. Thus, it will aid the researcher in reducing the number of taste marketers required. By developing cluster of data, the large set of data is reduced to meaningful aggregates, hereby easing the analyze very easy. So what we are doing here in the cluster analysis, we are segmenting or we are dividing the markets into different segments, and those are very homogeneous in nature. We can say here, the coming to the previous slide, um, before going to clustering, a person should remember few things, that a number of cluster may emerge after the analysis. However, as we are discussing, there are many segments in the segments in the market, but a marketer, before going to take any kind of strategic decision, he has to cluster them into some homogeneous category, but sometimes it is too difficult to categorize them, or what to be considered as a characteristics that to be implemented in clustering the segments. So, however, there is a limit of the number of clusters that a company can consider due to limitation of the market potential with a cluster, and the distinction between clusters is not clearly defined. Sometimes it happens with the market researcher that the definition or the cluster meaning or the segment, or we can say the definition of cluster, it is not clearly defined. So in that case, a researcher should be very careful about that. Before clustering that, that should be defined. If the definition of cluster or the characteristics is not defined, then he or she will define new characteristics, but that should be very relevant to the dimension. Then cluster analysis also provides a way of segmenting the market as it is, but these segments are not watertight compartments, because products that are developed for a particular segment may attract people from another segment too. So it sometimes happens, the few products we have designed, suppose for low income groups, but the same product attract by the is more popular by the high income group people. So what we can do, we cannot say that no, you people we cannot purchase that product as because it is designed for the low income groups. So in that case, we are facing few problems in clustering in cluster analysis, as because we have already set it this product for some categories of people, but another categories of people are now attracted by the same product, and the characteristics of a cluster may change over time as the consumer's economic status, education, lifestyle, etc. changes. As we said, a poor person's choice, and he was bound to purchase a particular product, but the same person, when he grows financially, or he become a richer one or the rich person, now the taste has been changed. Before that we have segmented few products, but now the customer has changed to another segments. So this is also another problem in the cluster analysis. What happens now, it is I have discussed about the financial status of the consumers, but sometimes when age grows also same things happens with the consumer, that that changes, that taste changes. So in that case, a researcher faces problem because the changes in the cluster or the number of respondent in one cluster were changing in the, or shifting to the another cluster. So this sometimes makes some problem for the researcher. But the researcher should keep all these things in the mind before applying the cluster analysis or before going to any kind of strategic decision for the market research. So here also we can see the inputs of cluster analysis. Since it is used for the purpose of segmenting of the market, one has to go thorough in the following procedure on a broad level. What are the procedure? The company identifies its own product capabilities and financial strength, distribution network, first hedge. What is these things? Now here we are saying that clustering means we are grouping a few things of the market, or we can say that we are segmenting the markets. But before segmenting these things, one should remember something we have to identify for preparation of cluster, like product capabilities. So what product I'm going to launch in the market, what is the capability of this product, like what is the strength of the product, who are the people will be attracted by this product, and what should be the cost of the product that for whom I am designing this, they can be capable of purchasing of these things. So this is coming under the product capabilities. And what is the financial strength? If my product is X, and this is the financial strength of my product, that should be defined. Otherwise, how could we segment the market according to our product? And the distribution network. I have produced a number of product and a large quantity, but thing is that whether the distribution or whether the network I have developed or not. So these three questions to be answered by the producer first. Who am I? What is my strength? What is my capabilities? All these things should be very clear on the first end. Then the company identifies the basis on which the customers are able to cluster. One factor segment maybe age, income, gender, geographic location. Second factor basis on segmenting of the marketplace. Multi-factor basis segment like marketplace, who am I and what I am going to serve. Then the third was is the respondent who participate in the research are given a questionnaire to complete. The questionnaire is typically in the interval scale, 5 point or 7 point questionnaire to be given. So in these are the things to be kept in the mind before going to the clustering of the, or we can say the segmenting or segmentation of the market before going to conclude the marketing research. So summarizely, in this chapter or in this unit, we have discussed about the factor analysis, which is a technique of data reduction, or we can say it is a summarization. Purely, we can say we are reducing the data, but we are not losing the data in our hand. But we are summarizing the data, similar kind of variables under a factor. Then same category or same kind of data analysis, that is cluster analysis, which is mainly used in the market segmentations. Some of its are applications I have used, and we have discussed with the help of the SPSS. Various inputs also we have discussed in cluster analysis. Further application to factor and cluster analysis have been explained in this unit. So finally, some of the important considerations that should be kept in mind while using factor and cluster analysis have been highlighted in these particular units. So thank you for today's unit.